So there's, if you want to start.
Okay.
This one has, I guess you can have a mic and I can have one. Here. If who is ever speaking wants to speak into this.
Okay. We're going to have someone join virtually. So the last minute scheduling change.
We have another.
Maybe on the other side.
Hey, John.
We need another chair.
Yeah, if there is one.
Can you hear me well?
I could sit in this. I'll sit in this lounge chair in the therapist chair. All right. How many mics we got?
Just one on our side.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, everyone. Thanks for taking the time. John, thank you for the last minute addition here. I think the purpose of today's talk is really to focus on interoperability. I think there's a lot of discussion around what it is, what it isn't. There's a lot of projects, a lot of smart people working on these projects here. And so we've gathered this panel here today. I'll be moderating to really just dive into what is interoperability, what are some of the exciting projects and tools that are being built in the open source space. So I'll just quickly introduce myself, and then I'll pass it to everyone in this order to introduce themselves and what projects they're working on. My name is Cameron. I lead banking capital markets at LayerZero. This is our office, so I hope you guys are enjoying the time here. We're one of probably the leading interoperability protocol in the blockchain space, predominantly have been very successful in the financial services area, including stablecoins and tokenized securities. We'll get more into that in a second. But John, I'll pass it to you to introduce yourself and quickly what you're working on.
Hey everybody, so yeah, I'm John. I am a developer relations engineer at LayerZero, the same place Cameron is working at. And yeah, I generally work with developers building on LayerZero. So making sure the UX of building with LayerZero is easy enough for them to go through, and also kind of pointing partners to the right places when it comes to the integration itself. So the primary goal for me and my team is to make sure the experience is as smooth as possible when it comes to enabling cross-chain features and deploying cross-chain tokens.
Great. Arne?
Yeah, I'm Arne Ritjes. I'm a maintainer on the Fabric Token SDK. And that's a tool that's mainly used for privacy-preserving token settlement. Of course, a token can be anything from securities to money. Many of our recent projects have been with central banks. And then most often you don't really have the asset and the money on the same blockchain. So interoperability is very important for us for delivery versus payments, for instance, when a bond or some other kind of asset is moving on a blockchain, and then we do the settlement on our end.
Thank you. My name is Weijia Zhang. I'm a maintainer of Smooth project of LFDT, and I'm also VP of engineering of OneChain. And OneChain is a project that started back in 2018, and we kind of put our mission in interoperability at that time to bridge different blockchains. So in 2018 we were able to bridge Ethereum, Bitcoin, and our chain. So, and also Fabric at that time, 2020, we also bridged Fabric as well. At that time, we did not even know what the use cases would be. And it turned out that there were huge growth with asset transfer and data transfer in the next few years. And I'm also chairing the EA Enterprise Ethereum Alliance interoperability working group. And yeah, and I'm very happy to be here, to be in this panel.
Thank you. My name is Andre. I'm a PhD student in Lisbon, in Portugal. So I have been working with Cacti since 2021, maintainer not so long. And I mean, basically I have been working with the security of interoperability protocols. And Hyperledger Cacti has been one of the tools I've leveraged to basically test some research and do some side projects as well that we have there.
I'm Carlos again. I'm also a PhD student. I'm starting right now. I'm in the first year of my PhD. I'm researching blockchain interoperability. I started with interoperability semantics in my master's, and now I'm going to dive into bridge aggregators. Yeah, thank you.
All right, great. Cool. Well, it seems like we got a great group of experts here. Maybe the first question I'll pose, and of course, if anybody has a question, please raise your hand. We'd be happy to pause and allow you guys to ask a question. The first question I'll ask the panelists in general is, what is the core development problem you are trying to solve? Like, what is the core issue, technical issue that you're trying to address, and what has worked and what hasn't worked in terms of tooling? So who wants to take that one first?
I can go ahead. So Cacti started, as I was saying, as I think the main idea, the main problem that was being solved was like this the lack of connection between different blockchains. It started, I believe, in 2019, 2020, something like that. The project at the time, there was probably not a lot of solutions. Not the flow that we have today between different blockchains. And so it started as a base for how can we build something that allows people to build cross-chain solutions very easily. So we have a bunch of different, that we call them basically plugins. So there are basically a lot of components that can be put together in order to help someone launching a cross-chain solution. That cross-chain solution can be whatever people want. It can be centralized, it can be more decentralized. You can develop your own logic depending on the security needs that you have, the needs of whoever is managing that interoperability protocol. And you can basically connect whatever blockchains you want there. So we have connectors that connect to specific blockchains. We have for Fabric, we have for EVM-based blockchains, we have for Polkadot, we have for a bunch of different blockchains. And if we don't support some blockchain, we can always develop something that allows you to support that and basically bridge or continue your existing logic with that new blockchain again.
Okay, I think we have similar challenges. I think the biggest problem, as I see, is the incompatibility of different blockchains. Right? Blockchain were designed to be siloed, stand alone, do not talk to other systems. So you have a Bitcoin, you have EVM, you have Cardano, Polkadot, Fabric. They all work different ways. And in blockchain, we do not have internet TCP/IP standard. So I think it would be a great job or great mission for LayerZero and all these interoperability companies to produce TCP/IP for blockchains. That would be huge. Okay, so that's the biggest challenge and biggest opportunity as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree, because it's pretty ironic actually that blockchain is really designed to be decentralized, but now we have all these little islands again. And I think the biggest problem is like how a commit is really final. So you always have like a two-phase commit kind of problem, and we have many different ways of solving it, but it's never perfect. And I think one step that we can take at least is to try to speak the same language in the protocols that we use, that at least that part is solved, and then we can focus on the technical problem and make that as small as possible. So I hope we can also talk later, maybe not even in this panel, but just today about how we can make it easier for developers of layer 1 protocols and smart contracts to actually talk to each other.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting, just before we move on to other people, the way I've always thought about interoperability, and this is a good question for the group, like what does interoperability mean to you, right? Specifically blockchain interoperability. It's not really so much a technical issue. It seems like more of a coordination issue, right? We have multiple projects, multiple commercial initiatives in place that are all seeking to harmonize cross-chain communication. But you mentioned something really interesting is around harmonization of communication standards, right? TCP/IP. Yeah. I'm sure John has a lot of thoughts on that because that's something that we often use as like a parallel for what we've built at LayerZero, is to communicate or standardize blockchain communications. And I think someone else had mentioned that blockchains are inherently walled gardens, right? That's why they're so secure, is that they operate in isolation, right? Which is ironic because they're decentralized, right? So maybe, to continue this, maybe I'll pass it to John to maybe share a little bit on, what his perspective is on communication standards, et cetera.
Yeah, I think this is a good analogy. I think whenever I try to explain interoperability in crypto to anyone outside of crypto, I say things like, well, email works across Gmail, Outlook, and Yahoo, right? Banks settle across Swift and ACH, and the internet generally runs on shared protocols like TCP/IP. But it's not quite the same. Obviously, our space is growing very fast, but we're still at a really raw stage where every blockchain is different. Every blockchain is siloed, although most of the liquidity is fragmented. And I guess the hardest challenge for us at LayerZero is the speed of kind of going to all of these different blockchains. Because again, all blockchains have a different implementation. We would love it to be the same, and so that we can deploy essentially your endpoint in a similar fashion to every blockchain, but that's just not the reality. And yeah, for us, I think a really big bottleneck is how to kind of every time we have to deploy an endpoint, which is essentially this start of the bridge on any blockchain that is not fully EVM compatible or like a non-EVM, it becomes a huge kind of process of having to change the original code and go through an audit and all those things, right? So I think part of the reason why it's like blockchain interoperability is still different from all of these internet protocols like TCP/IP is because of this kind of main bottleneck. For me though, I think we are moving towards a world where with maybe ZK and like newer technology, we will be able to deploy one instance of the same thing on any blockchain, not just on EVMs, but we would be able to deploy on non-EVMs as easily as EVMs. So that's the future I'm looking forward to. That would definitely enable the interoperability in the crypto space to be much like what we see outside.
Anybody want to follow up?
Yeah. Going back to the TCP protocol, yeah, of course, we experienced some weeks ago or months ago some AWS outage, and basically a blockchain that is supposed to be decentralized when you can get it from whenever, the one provider goes out and the DNS does not work, and we cannot access our funds, whatever we have in the blockchain. So I think for the interoperability part, we also need to find a solution for this and maybe move out of the traditional DNS or create something new. I think it's a good idea for a researcher or for some company or companies that are interested on the part of interoperability. Because if everything is centralized, the interoperability is not centralized anything. If everything is centralized and when companies go out and you cannot access your funds or your data from the blockchain, what you're gonna do? So I think it's one thing that's one of the most important things that we need to think about this.
Yeah, and I do want to actually get to risks at some point here. Like, what are some of the risks that we think? But before we get to that point, I wanted to actually ask the panelists, each of you guys, to discuss like, what are the most exciting use cases that you've seen as demand for interoperability, and how are you guys supporting those use cases? So, Arne, maybe we were talking about some interesting stuff with central banks. Maybe it'd be nice to share the DVP model that you discussed and some more there.
Yeah, sure. So the European Central Bank has done experiments last year with many participants also from the commercial space. So that would be banks and financial institutions and those kinds. And they have 3 different ledgers. One of them was built by us or with our support. And they were doing real settlement in central bank money of transferring bonds and other kinds of financial assets. And of course, with most of these experiments, the interoperability was the key part. What we wanted to prove was basically that we can have this new way of settling money, but still being integrated in the whole existing world. and yeah, it's been very exciting, and I think also very promising to see how the worlds of public blockchain and also permission blockchain are merging now. So yeah, that's for me, that's the most exciting part, that we can see now that we're moving towards adoption also in the financial world.
Yeah. It almost feels like, I don't know if the audience agrees, right? Like when, even like 4 or 5 years ago when, we were deep in this space too, it almost felt like these permissioned private chains were operating literally as islands, right? But now everyone, all these financial institutions, like even on our side at LayerZero, we're seeing a lot of demand to make it so that the customers, they don't really have to know what chain they're on, right? It's just about what financial products they're using and how they're moving those assets and putting them to work, right? So that's definitely something that resonates, is like it should be as abstracted away as possible to the end user what chain they're on, right? It's just about what's the financial product. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on like exciting use cases. What's the most exciting thing you guys are working on right now? Yeah.
I almost wanted to say things you just said. Okay, so it's what interoperability is that users don't care which chain they are on, right? So it should be intent based and chain abstraction. So the next big thing would be like interoperability should be behind the scenes, so that users do not need to know which chain they are going to be on. But that require two things. One is interoperability with chain abstraction and intent based transactions. And second thing is that you need the AI to do the transaction for them. So that what if users just say, I want to have best yield, and then they put the fund in one chain, and then the AI will look at that and then move the fund to whatever chain that has the highest yield. And that should have, of course, security and low cost and behind the scene kind of transaction protocols. So that's something I find very, very exciting.
And when you say intent based, you mean AI driven, like optimization, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there a specific area you're seeing there being demand for this use case?
Just I mentioned the optimizing yield.
Yeah.
I have a fund, just put it here, and then my AI agent is going to move to the chain that has the highest yield. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of back to like the permissioned, permissionless infrastructure discussion, right? Like in that example, if that user has the authority to use that token, right, it should be coded within the interoperability mechanism to allow them to go chase that yield on XYZ chain, right? It should be all permissioned.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm speaking, of course, from the security token world, but yeah, so that's kind of like the idea here, is to embed these rules within the workflows.
Yeah,
so that's automated.
It's just like traditional banks, right? You have different banks have different interests and different rules, right? If the AI can figure it out for them, they can move the fund to optimize the yield. And blockchain is easier because it's all permissionless to some extent, and it's all with interoperability. It just can move without user signing every transaction. The AI agent can do that for them. But we look at that, there's huge security consideration we need to take care. So AI agent should just move the fund, but without the authorization. They have the power to do the transaction, but without the power to move the fund. So there'll be two processes that's needed. One is the command, one is the action. So there are a lot of things that need to be worked out, a lot of challenges over there.
And on the Cacti side, what are you guys seeing as exciting applications today?
So Cacti has this big focus also on interoperability between private and public blockchains, right? Especially with Hyperledger Fabric, and also Bezu, that has this capability of deploying private or public blockchains. So actually, one of the first use cases that we also worked at was central bank digital currencies as well. So the use case at the time was with the Hungarian central bank. They were considering basically one blockchain that would basically take the central bank to central bank communication and the wholesale CBDC part, and then you have other small blockchains that take care of the retail businesses, right? So smaller transactions, and we needed to have this interoperability between the different chains to make some settlements once in a while in the big one, let's say. So we still have one of the probably the primary example of Cacti is using CBDCs. And most recently, we have a couple of companies using a product that we have in Cacti. So it's basically an implementation of a standard. If we go again to the standards, um, and they are working on they are using that for multiple use cases ranging from traceability of animals and information that is on multiple blockchains, and we just need to transfer that. It doesn't actually need to be so when we're talking about interoperability, we need to think about different things, and sometimes different layers, and sometimes we're focusing solely on the financial aspect, but a token can represent much more than that. It can just be like some bytes of data, right? So before actually having that like application, that semantics built on top of that, we probably first of all need to know how to transfer bytes of information from those multiple blockchains, and that can represent a token, can represent the logic of how to interact with the token, or something else that's just business related, doesn't really matter.
That's a great point. And actually, John, that might be a good segue for you in terms of our, how LayerZero has standardized cross-chain communications and all the variety of use cases that can be supported, including value transfer, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I think this is a great point that interoperability is just not about moving money; it's actually about moving information safely. I think when it comes to the analogy where like LayerZero is TCP/IP protocol, and it's clearly kind of given here is that initially the design of LayerZero was to transfer bytes, right? It was essentially to encode bytes on one side, verify them, and then decode on the other side. We've been continuing to maintain this, and obviously this is the core of the technology. One of the main reasons why I'm super excited to work here is because outside of simply like value transfer and OFTs, there are things that we have created and have defined called composing. Generally, composing just simply means that you're able to attach more functionality on the destination side, meaning it's not just send the token from chain A to chain B, you can also encode the data for some function call on the destination side, or wherever your creativity takes you. Right? So lots of different capabilities to open up this functionality to essentially be, for example, just like value transfer plus some extra functionality on the destination side. So a couple of interesting use cases just on composing and additional functionality. I think one of the more interesting technologies that we built together with Ondo and Denari is a way to essentially tokenize US stocks on chain, right? The problem with that is that I think it's really important, especially in this use case, to have unified liquidity, right? Essentially, what LayerZero allows us with composing and OSPs is to create a set of contracts that would allow for essentially these smart contracts that are one-to-one matched to the real stocks out there in the real world to be composable and settled within each other, between each other, which is something that is super exciting for me. Another thing that I think another point that some of the panelists have mentioned is that interoperability is simply kind of chain abstraction and abstraction for the user so that the user never needs to know bridging chains or gas tokens or anything like that, right? I think if every app that I've ever used in Web3 used like LayerZero or some other interop protocol, and I would never need to know which chain should I deliver this token to before I can use this app, my life would be easier. And I'm pretty sure most of people who use Web3 natively would appreciate this a lot. Some of the kind of more recent use cases that I've seen and have used personally, but still kind of lack the interoperability aspect, is like prediction markets. I think prediction markets in the US have grown super strongly and also globally. But still, I think there's no kind of a standard to unify all the liquidity across chains. Like Galaxy is planning to deploy to many chains, but still, I think there's going to be a big problem with interop between these chains because of the goal to unify liquidity across all off-chain and on-chain. So I think there are really like a lot of interesting use cases, and not just kind of creating stable coins and simple tokens. I think using the concept of composability with composers, you can really define and create any architecture for your interoperability application that essentially just encodes bytes and decodes it on the other side safely.
Yep. Okay, so we got like a good lay of the land of the use cases, some of the exciting applications. I think now is time to get to Carlos's point around risk, right? Like, what are some of the risks inherent in the interoperability world? And importantly, what are some of the trust assumptions that are associated with different interoperability mechanisms? So, Carlos, maybe you want to shed some light there.
Yeah, that actually is a very important problem. We had a lot of money and tokens lost in bridges. There is actually one website, I don't remember now the name of it, but you can see the amount of money. It's like to the billions. I don't know if it got there, but it's almost $1 billion of tokens and money more lost in transactions between the ledgers. And for the cacti point, we don't focus on. We have that part on the protocol level and whatever, but because cacti is a framework, we just provide the tools so you can make your application, your solution. So the part of the screwing what we are doing, it's your problem, not ours. We are providing you the tools for the connection to the blockchains and the abstraction of the data, but the part of the security is also a job for the person that is implementing the solution. For the traceability, there are some talks about having a trustless protocol, and that involves zero knowledge. But the zero knowledge, it's kind of weird because you can. I don't know if everyone is knows what zero knowledge is, but basically you need to prove something without showing that thing. And for private blockchains, it's hard to do, or maybe impossible. I don't know. We have one person that is doing a master that is in our teams that is working on that. Yeah, I can pass to the other person.
Yep.
So, so in terms of risk, so there's one very interesting research paper from the Imperial College London that talks about there is no, or it is impossible to have an asynchronous cross-chain communication protocol without a trusted party. So usually in current bridges, we kind of drop a little bit that asynchrony. And to also don't need to avoid this thing of trusting a third party. So the important thing is we always need to trust something, right? So this is kind of a spectrum, right? So we can range from something where we trust a centralized party that makes the connection between the different blockchains. We can start decentralizing that a little bit, but we always need to rely on something, even a cryptographic protocol, even like snarks or something. They also need some kind of trusted party that guarantees the validity of the circuits and so on. So not going into a lot of details into that. So, but it's really interesting to talk about this kind of security and performance trade-offs, and also privacy if we go into the permission blockchains, where we just need to sit somewhere where the use case that makes sense for the use case, right? And there's not exactly one solution that works for everyone and for every single person that wants to run a bridge protocol. So it's basically a spectrum, and we just need to define where we want to be.
Yeah, I have a question about that. Do we want to have many different kinds of bridge protocols and different kinds of ways to do it? Or do we want to consolidate and have just one? Because I think it might be more secure if we have more, that we always have something else to fall back on. But it's also, it makes our life a lot harder to have to support all these different things.
So I think the answer for that is what we were talking about at the beginning, is standards, right? So if we have a standard for communication, then we can start building things on top of that. And they may be different or run by different people, but they are based on the same logic that is kind of battle tested, let's say. And I think that makes sense to me. I think it doesn't make sense, of course, to have like 100 different solutions based on 100 different things, because that's just opening the door to like hacks and so on. Right? So I think the standardization is really important in various levels. So I think we have here probably Waja and probably LayerZero have this kind of standardization more towards the application. We have been working on something that's more like infrastructure communication, and where actually the messages are sent not really thinking about what's the payload and what's being there, and not thinking about the smart contracts and the logic within. So I think it also has that complexity in terms of standardization, right?
So is there something we can do as, sorry.
No, go ahead.
As people who work on layer one, like on Fabric or on Hyro, is there something we can do, like having endpoints, like in Fabric, for instance? If it's a permission network, we already know we trust a set of endorsers. We have an endorsement policy. Would it be useful if they could all, if we would have a query function that you get assigned at the station of the ledger state? What kind of practical, well, maybe we can discuss this after, but what kind of practical things can we do to make interoperability between at least all the Linux Foundation projects easier? Sorry, you wanted to?
Yeah, several things pop into my mind when talking about state of interoperability, right? And Carlos and Andre also mentioned that, hey, it doesn't have to be necessarily a financial or start as a financial use case, finance use case. And there's a token taxonomy. So is there any, is that being used? That's one of my questions, right? The other question is, what does the IEEE say about that, right? And I'm asking that question because what you're saying as a problem is something that actually has been two-phase commit. So it's something that has happened at a lower level already in systems engineering, right? And that has been solved. Is there a way to maybe reuse from that to try to, otherwise if you're building a bridge from ground zero up, maybe someone already built it way back and we forgot about it, right? So that's another question that pops into my mind. And the last one, so how would Chainlink, I'm sorry that I bring up compare to that, because they're another word that's going around a lot. So I was interested, is it just, are they just one more way? And it's like choosing any of you would be based on if it's not EVM or EVM being the same as using them or not, right? Those are questions I'm having while you guys have been talking.
Yeah, I can answer the two questions you raised. First, about token taxonomy. Right? 5 years ago, there was a token taxonomy initiative by EEA Enterprises Human Alliance. And we produced almost 30 or 40 pages token taxonomy initiative document. And then Microsoft did the first implementation. So basically, you can create token graphically, create token, move a token, and then assign the token. Graphically, design the token, but it did not go anywhere. And then there was another entity formed to push for token taxonomy initiative, but did not go anywhere. So I don't think IEEE is driving that right now. So I think because there's too many restrictions to adopt that, too difficult. So that answers your question about the status of that thing, token taxonomy. And second thing about the what's the second question exactly? Yeah, no, that I answered that question. They are not doing work on that one. Okay, so I think they're talking about the the bridges, some of the bridges have been, yeah. Oh, the chain link. Yeah, the second question about chain link. Chain link originally was to move data from legacy systems, the web system, to blockchain system. That's what we call it Oracle. I know it very, very well. And then they want to move to blockchain interoperability as well. That's when they design CCIP, blockchain interoperability. Same. So we are coming converge to the same space. So initially, they try to move from legacy system to blockchain. Now they are Oracle. Now they are doing the chain to chain as well. So I think we're coming together, and then we are at the time to almost to kind of converge and define something together. That's why we have this kind of panel. That's great. Okay, but I want to answer risk. Okay, because we published a paper about the cross-chain interoperability security guideline with EEA Enterprise Alliance. I know the Carlos mentioned the amount 2 years ago, the hack on bridges amount was $1.8 billion, $1.8 billion. Okay, just bridge hack. So that talking about that's a huge risk, right? And then the risk is that any chain, any source chain get hacked, become a bridge issue, right? Because you are crossing the asset. And also finality. Some chain takes 30 blocks to finalize. And then you need to mint the asset on the other side. And then if that chain get the rollback, then it impact the asset on the other side. And many people do not know about these security risk over there. So we need to emphasize that, okay? Another thing I feel is coming is sorry, I'm going to finish this one, compliance. Right? If the government is saying that, hey, you cannot move this asset from private chain to public chain, then the bridge is at risk because of the compliance. It's the CBDC, those tokens, you cannot move to public chain, and then we have risk with compliance as well.
Yeah. And I appreciate the chain link question on the topic of risk, because LayerZero was, and I'll pass it to John in a second, but in summary, LayerZero was created with the assumption that we wanted to minimize risk and make applications own their entire security stack, which is a key differentiating architectural approach that we took. So we believe in app-specific security. So you as an application owner, developer, you get to customize the security stack that's associated with validating cross-chain messages. That's kind of like the key difference when you look at like the Chainlink model, which has the decentralized Oracle network. It's usually a fixed set of validators that operate off-chain. Whereas with the LayerZero model, and we were talking about who do you trust? Who do you trust? Well, we believe that you should just trust yourself, right? So you can actually host your own version of a DON, which is called a DVN, and you can essentially program it to operate in the way that you want it to, meaning it attests to on-chain events, it can relay mint instructions, etc. So that's the key difference on a risk standpoint. Do you have a follow-up before I pass it to John? Okay. John, do you want to explain a little bit more about app-specific security and the trust assumptions there?
For sure. Yeah, I wanted to also touch on some of the points that were mentioned by the panelists which relate to this. But yeah, the way LayerZero and I personally see security is essentially in a couple of few components. So one is permissionlessness. Second is immutability and censorship resistance. I think when you're deciding which interop protocol to choose, it essentially boils down to whether it's secure or not. So with LayerZero, what we do is we deploy immutable contracts that cannot be changed, the logic of which cannot be changed when they're deployed. That's one aspect of immutability. Second aspect is what Cameron already mentioned is DVNs. So what we call DVNs are essentially the same third parties that have been mentioned by other panelists today that you need to trust, right? And there's also like essentially two parties that you need to trust in the LayerZero system: the DVN and the executor. So the one who is actually executing the message on the destination side. So obviously we know about the risks associated with trusting generally. And that's why part of the reason why we created essentially this app-specific security narrative is because technologically and like technically, you can program your own DVN. You could even use other interoperability protocols as a DVN on LayerZero. So for example, Axelar is another interoperability protocol that delivers messages, and it is part of the DVN set at LayerZero. So assuming that the value that you're kind of moving across two chains is so important that you cannot risk any security, you can build a DBN by yourself and verify messages by yourself and trust no one but yourself. Also, you can set your own executor, the one who's executing the message on the destination side, to be your address. And obviously, that's a bit of operational overhead. So you always have to compare, I guess, whether you want to have a technical and operational overhead or a security kind of risk, right? So, but the thing that LayerZero allows and what we stand on is that we want to allow you and give you all the tools for you to build your own custom security stack the way you want it to be. And that's, I think, one of the main points. But obviously, everything boils down to either security or operational and technical overhead that you want to have for the application that you're building.
It was a good question, though. Thank you for asking that. Any reactions or any more questions? I guess we got like 6-7 minutes here, but any questions for the panelists besides the phone ringing?
Is anyone else here working on interoperability?
I'm not actually working on any of the solutions that you work on, but my company's getting into a project that interoperability is going to be a big part of it. It's a project for my IDB, so there's Inter-American Development Bank, and it's related to CBDCs in Latin America. So, I mean, we are looking to use Cacti on that project. So I'm going to have to talk to you a lot about that. But so far we are in a very initial stage. So I don't have much details on the technical part, but it's something that I'm really interested in about. I want to get input from personally from all of you that have those.
We're glad to see someone joining.
Two questions regarding the capital movie. So assume a situation where I have two fabric networks. I want to transfer some assets from fabric network A to fabric network B. Now fabric has typically the states where you can maintain the older state of the asset. You try to do certain updates on an asset, and the previous state is also maintained into the ledger. So assume that I transfer that or move that asset from fabric network A to fabric network B. In the fabric network B, am I going to get all the entire state or the entire life of that asset?
So I'm not an expert on fabric, so I may not be able to answer that as a whole. But first of all, we need to define what exactly is that transfer, right? So there are multiple ways of doing this cross-chain transfer because you're not actually like removing stuff from one of the blockchains, right? You can, if you're able to do that, you can burn that token. If you don't have that permission, you need to use some kind of escrow, and that token is just kept locked. But its history it's kept locked. It's kept there, like on the blockchain, right? If Fabric allows you to, have that information with you on the destination blockchain, and you publish that, then it's possible to do, but probably not in a way of like the information is probably updated in multiple blocks throughout history, and you cannot simply do that on the destination blockchain. What you can do is probably push everything and write it in one single batch on the destination blockchain, and you have the whole history like hard coded, let's say.
So
Does that mean?
this task has to be done by the team who is migrating the assets, or the framework itself, the Cacti itself is able to handle this kind of scenario?
An application using Cacti, can do that. So we have some one specific protocol, for example, that can do that, and you can implement that. The logic, what happens specifically, you can implement that with your chain code. Right?
The other question that I have is, this is on the EVM chains. Assume that I'm running an EVM chain, for example, it's a basic chain, it's a private chain that I'm running, and I have tokens layer in the private Ethereum chain. Now I want to move that tokens to public Ethereum network. So how does that going to look like?
What?
I can answer the question.
So I want
Sure.
to move assets or the tokens that I have in private chain to public chain.
Yeah, I can answer the question. Actually, we did bridging Basu to public blockchain EVM. So basically, there are multiple ways to do that. The most common one is basically lock the original token on the source chain, lock it with smart contract, and then you emit an event, okay, saying that this amount of asset have been locked in this source chain, and then the relayer, the chain name messaging layer, see that and then convey the message securely to the target chain, and then target chain will mint the same amount of token on the target chain. That's the lock and then mint mechanism. And then if you want to revert back, just burn this one, unlock this one. So, and then answer your first question. Normally, it doesn't convey the history of that token on the source chain to the target chain, with one exception. If it's layer 2, if you are bridging layer 2 to layer 1, yes, that is kept. You can trace the history. But if just layer 1 to layer 1, that won't. That's just the token amount that's minted.
Yeah. Follow up on this, like, can I establish a correlation between the tokens that I have in private chain,
yeah,
and when I move them to the public chain?
Yeah.
Can I set up a correlation amongst those tokens that I move?
Well, it depends fungible or non-fungible, right? If none is fungible, there's no correlation unless you build your own database. Yes, you can build own third-party database to track that actually, and then yeah, there are people doing that. Okay, and then if it's non-fungible, yes, there's a correlation. Yeah, it's unique. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to maybe close out by responding to that, on the LayerZero protocol, we offer an API called the Data API, so you can pull any data related to any token that's moved on LayerZero. So that's one way that you can manage and monitoring your supply across chains. Right, it doesn't matter what chain it's on. Happy to share it with you after this as well and what it looks like. So we are at time, but I think this was a very fruitful discussion. Thank you for the panelists for joining us. I hope this was helpful for you guys as well. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. And for everybody, this team up here, Richa, Carlos, Andre, as well as Rama, did a fantastic workshop back in November on Cacti. If you want to check it out, it's on the LFDT YouTube. We also created a Maintainer Days channel on Discord. If you presented, whether it's a lightning talk or you had a couple of slides and you want to put it up there, I can't make you do it, but if you'd like to share that stuff, put it up on Discord. This way everybody can check it out. Great.
And why don't we stay right here? Why don't we take it before we break for lunch? Let's take a quick group photo as we talked about the Linux Innovation Decentralized Trust Member Summit is happening tomorrow and the next day. People there are going to be really interested in what's happening here. So we're going to do a short presentation. Arun's going to give a presentation, and we'd like to show everybody there who is here today. So let's do a quick group photo. Then we'll break for lunch. There is still some breakfast tacos, or are some breakfast